Good evening, everybody. Tonight, we have a very special guest. Usually on Tuesdays, we feature guests, but tonight is the 22nd day of Shvat, which marks the 36th anniversary of the passing of Rebbetzin Chayamushka. Rebbetzin Chayamushka was the middle daughter of the previous Rebbe. She was born in Lubavitch in 1901, and she married our Rebbe in Poland in 1929. And came to the United States with our Rebbe in 1942. She was extraordinarily influential in persuading her husband to assume the leadership after the passing of her father in 1950. And even people who lived in Crown Heights almost never, or probably never, saw Rebbetzin Chayamushka. She never came to 770 to the synagogue, not for Rosh Hashanah, not for Yom Kippur, not for Farbrengens. Why? We can only speculate. She passed away, as I mentioned, in 1988. It seemed to come completely out of, without warning, although the people who knew her well were familiar with her physical condition. And she remained, in many ways, a complete mystery to even, like I said, people who lived their whole lives in Crown Heights. Since her passing, stories started to trickle out and then come out in great abundance about her. Personal stories, individual stories, stories of her involvement in the operations of Chabad, stories of her great personal righteousness, and stories that illustrated the meaning of truly being the daughter of a Rebbe and the wife of a Rebbe. So tonight being her yahrzeit, I asked Rabbi Klein, who has some, is one of the rare people who has some personal interactions with the Rebbetzin, to please come on. And in honor of her yahrzeit, to share some of those experiences. Many of you, I think probably everybody here, but maybe not, knows Rabbi Klein. He has been the shliach of the Rebbe to the community of Evanston and to Northwestern University since he had a dark beard for 40 years, I think. Am I guessing that correctly? For 40 years.
39.
39. He is the police chaplain of Evanston Police. He served in many capacities. He's gone around the world lecturing and speaking about dealing with college students of numerous generations for decades. He's somebody local, and I think everybody here probably knows Rabbi Klein. So I asked him, and he was very gracious to immediately agree to share with us some of his personal interactions with Rebbetzin Chayamushka. So first and foremost, Rabbi Klein, thank you so much for being here. Just to share with everybody that tonight Rabbi Klein came to Daven Ma'ariv with us, and he recited the Mourner's Kaddish for the Rebbetzin as an illustration of his reverence for her and his particular connection. So, Rabbi, thank you for joining us. Thank you for all you've done for 4 decades to serve the Jews in Evanston and Northwestern and around the world. And give us a little background about how you came to have this really rare relationship with Rebbetzin Chayamushka.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Epstein, for inviting me. And I didn't have many weeks in order to prepare for this talk. I had like a half an hour. But I do want to say, before I talk about how I had my personal connection with the Rebbetzin, as Rabbi Epstein pointed out, the Rebbetzin was considered an unbelievable, amazing person. And it was always said that she was an equal with the Rebbe when it came to intellect. In other words, she was the Rebbe's sparring partner. The Rebbe, she would insist that when the Rebbe came home from the Farbrengens to discuss with him the intimate details of what the Rebbe spoke about, and she would sometimes, disagree or argue or give the Rebbe his share due, so to speak. I remember a story that I heard from Rabbi Groner, who was the Rebbe's secretary. The Rebbetzin one time came to him and said to him, you need to tell my husband to go to sleep. She was always concerned about the Rebbe's health and the Rebbe's well-being. And you have to make, the Rebbe's not sleeping at night. And now for the Rebbe not to sleep at night, the Rebbe used to get only 2.5 hours of sleep each night, and not necessarily consecutively. So for the Rebbe not to sleep at night means he's getting even less than that. So Rabbi Groner said back to Rebbetzin, well, why don't you mention something to the Rebbe? He says, maybe he'll listen to you. And so Rabbi Groner did mention to the Rebbe that, the Rebbetzin concerned he's not having any sleep at night. And the Rebbe's response was, how can I possibly go to sleep when I know there are people up in Australia waiting for my responses? The Rebbe was very careful to make sure he read every single letter that came to him and responded in the Rebbe's way of responding. And one of the things that I learned about the Rebbetzin after Rebbetzin passed away was that she was very, very committed, and she followed through and she followed up with whoever she had a connection with or a contact with. And the story that when Rabbi Epstein asked me to talk before I was thinking about my own personal interaction, I remember the story about there was 3 women who came from Borough Park. They weren't Chabad women. They were involved with other communities, and they came and knocked on the Rebbe's door. They wanted a bracha for children. They didn't know the protocol in Crown Heights, and the Rebbe wasn't at home at the time, but the Rebbetzin was, and she opened the door, and she asked, "Can I help you?" And she was very gracious and very kind and very welcoming. And they said that they wanted the bracha from the Rebbe in order to have children. So the Rebbetzin said to them, "I'm going to give you a name of a doctor in Manhattan, a gynecologist. He's an expert, and I'm sure that he will be able to help you." This was a person who it would take months and months to see. And 2 of the women went. The third one said, "Hey, this is not really for her," and they went to Manhattan, and they went and said to the nurse, said that their names and that they want to have an appointment to see the doctor. So the nurse says the first opening appointment we have is in 5 months from now. She said, 5 months from now? Rebbetzin Schneerson told us to come now. So she said, who? She said, Rebbetzin Schneerson told us to see the doctor today. Anyway, the doctor came out, and the doctor said, oh, you must be 2 of the 3 women that the Rebbetzin called me this morning to find that I should meet you and help you. And Baruch Hashem, they had children 9 months later. But she followed up. She wasn't like, oh, you know what, get off my door for us, or immediately. She was a busy woman. She was a librarian for the city, but she followed through, and she followed through immediately. The reason that I'm saying that story is I have my own personal story with the Rebbetzin. As Rabbi Rebbetzin pointed out, not many people had an opportunity to meet the Rebbetzin. Typically, you didn't see the Rebbetzin in Crown Heights. You didn't see the Rebbetzin. In fact, when the Rebbetzin used to go into her car, she was quick to get into her car, and she zoomed out of her parking spot. Because she didn't want people to stare at her. You can imagine, as much as we want to see the pictures of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was with us, how we would just stare at the Rebbe, want to see the Rebbe, listen to the Rebbe. She didn't want that attention. She didn't want to take attention away from the Rebbe, but she was a tznuah. She was extremely modest, and she didn't want the attention given to her. So people didn't really have connections. Even though I was a Ben Bias, whenever I went to Crown Heights, I stayed at Rabbi Daniel Levy's home, Alav Shalom, and his mother was a personal friend of the Rebbetzin. And his mother, Rebbetzin Levy, would go at least once a month, once every other month, to have tea with the Rebbetzin in the Rebbe's home. And they had that friendship before the Rebbetzin came to the U.S. and they kept it up while she was here in the U.S. And again, she followed suit. She followed through. Anyway, in my days in the 80s, I was a bacher in Morristown, New Jersey at the time. I was there from 80 to 83. And the minhag in Lubavitch at that time, it's not like today. Today, if you are a bacher, a student, a young man, you want to go out and be a shliach as a student of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, To my students, I call it internships, but it's not more than just going for an internship. You're going on a shlichus with the Rebbe to a yeshiva to learn with younger bachrim and to younger students and to perhaps study with people in the community. And this was something that was very important to me. And in the early 80s, those who went on shlichus as a student weren't on shlichus as an adult as well, typically. In other words, very rare that if you didn't go on shlichus as a student, it was very rare that you went on shlichus once you became an adult, once you got married, once you learned in Kalo. You went out into the business world. But if you were a shliach already as a bacher, that already gave you the inspiration and the grassroots in order to be able to the experience to be able to go out and become a shliach somewhere. It's not like today where there's shluchim in every corner, every face, every place. When I came here to Chicago in 1985, I opened up officially the first Chabad of Illinois, the first Chabad house. I'll talk about that in a few moments because I think that's part of my experience with the Rebbetzin as well. So it wasn't like we have 50 Chabad centers behind her, maybe now 51. So the new shliach coming, 55 now, throughout the state of Illinois. When I came, we had Evanston, we had Highland Park, and Rabbi Posen was contemplating opening up a basement minyan in somebody else's home. That's what was here. Of course, we have Congregation B'nai Ruvain, but that wasn't considered at that time the concept of shlichus. That was a shul. Anyway, so for me, it was extremely important that I wanted to be a shliach of the Rebbe. Now, as a student, but for whatever reason, I wasn't chosen. And that was very painful for me not to be chosen. And I had theoretically 4 opportunities to go on as a bachar on shlichus. Well, the first one, which I thought for sure I wouldn't go, was to California. My closest friends went to California. I wasn't smart enough to go to California. That wasn't going to happen until LA, to the Rosh's yeshiva. The second place then was New Haven. And the yeshiva in Morristown, New Haven wasn't considered such an illustrious place. And they felt that I deserved to be in somewhere a little bit more high of a standard. So they were hoping that I would go to Miami. So the list usually comes out in the month of Elul, but this list didn't. So the New Haven came out in Elul, but the group going to Miami, which by the way, Rabbi Epstein's brother was actually on that list. The list finally came out in the middle of Tishrei, right after Rosh Hashanah, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and I wasn't on that list, and I was devastated because I didn't know what to do. I was already becoming very older. Most of the Rabbi Epstein's brother, he was a class under mine. So the fact that I wasn't on this list was kind of like, that's it. I'm not going anywhere. And I remember speaking to Rabbi Volshansky, he gave me an option. I can go to Chavavei Torah and learn with the Israelis, or I could stay in Morristown for another year. I chose to stay in Morristown for another year, figuring the year after that, I'd go straight into 770. Well, that year came to an end. And by the way, there was a 4th place, Australia, and I wasn't on that list either. And my mashpia told me I wasn't on that list because you go for 2 full years, and being the fact that I myself am a Baal Tshuva, they felt that for me to go away from my family for 2 full years wasn't appropriate. Okay, so I'm not going. I felt bad. I felt horrible. I felt rejected. And then the end of that year came. And we're going into, this is the end of Tasha Mem Beis, going into Tasha Mem Gimel, 1982 into 83. And now where was I going to learn? Well, I didn't want to go to Chavavei Torah, but I wasn't accepted into 770. So in the back of my mind, the next shlichus for students was going to be to Seattle, Washington. So in the back of my mind, I thought maybe I can go to Seattle. But I was already 22 years old. People my age were coming back from shlichus already, and they were learning smicha, going out and getting married. Okay, so the possibility of me going was less than 1%, was negative 100%. Anyway, that being said, I wasn't sure what to do. Anyway, like I said, usually in the month of Elul, the list came out, the list didn't come out. The month of Tishrei, it was late, didn't come out. We're now in the middle of the month of Cheshvan. We're in November. Okay, end of October, beginning November. And the list still didn't come out from the Rebbe's office of who's going to Seattle, Washington, which students. And this is decided by the welcoming yeshiva and by the yeshiva that the students are coming from. And then they write the names into the Rebbe. Well, Rabbi Glukowski, he was the administrator for the yeshivas in New York. And they needed to register me because they needed to get funds for me from the government. They needed to have me registered. And he said, you've got to register. They saw me Shabbos. And he said, Sunday, you got to come up to my office. His office was on the 3rd floor of 770. You have to come up to my office and sign the papers. So reluctantly, I went up, signed all the papers, and I came out of his office and I pushed the elevator to go down, wait for the elevator to come. Who comes out of the Rebbe's brother-in-law's apartment? The Rebbetzin. So the Rebbetzin comes out of the apartment. She was visiting her sister, and I wasn't sure what to do. So I walked towards the end of this very short hallway. And I figured, you know what? She'll go down the elevator first. I can take the next elevator. It's not that long of a wait. The elevator came. If anybody's been in 770, you know that the elevator there is so huge. It's buried these heavy doors. It's not like we have elevators that open on their own and they stay open. This is a door you have to open yourself. And she opens the door and she's holding it open. This the Rebbetzin. She looks right at me and she says, in Yiddish, she says to me, Bacher, kommt nicht rein. Student, young man, are you not coming in? So my mind is racing. Do I go in? Do I not go in? Well, she invited me in. So I figure I'll go in. So I go in. She pushed 2. I pushed B. I was going to the basement, to the lower level of 770. So I pushed B. She pushed 2. Now, let me tell you something. It doesn't take a long time to go from 3 to 2. So she's holding the door open again. This heavy door. And she says to me, what's your name? What's your name? I said, Rabbi Klein. Now, I got to tell you, when I was speaking to the Rebbetzin, I felt like I was in Yechidus with the Rebbe. I was in Yechidus in the Rebbe in 1980. No one else existed. It was just the Rebbetzin, and her focus was completely given over to me. And it was, to me, it was like kind of like, I felt like I was in Yechidus. Okay? And it was like, it was very overwhelming. So she says to me, what's your name? So I said, Rabbi Klein. Then she asks me the $1 million question. Wie lernst du? Where do you learn? I said, I don't know. She asked me, where am I studying? Where am I learning? I said, I don't know. Then she says back to me, what's Mainstay? What do you mean? So I said to her, we're waiting for the list of the Bachrim Shluchim to come out from the Rebbe's office for those who are going to Seattle. And then she says to me, Ich will ansagen my man. I will tell my husband. And the door closes. And I go down to B. And a friend of mine comes running over to me. So he says, Dohil, are you okay? You're totally white. I said, okay. I just spoke to the Rebbetzin. You know, who gets that opportunity? Who has that schus? The next morning, the Rebbe's secretary, Rabbi Klein, comes over to me right before davening and says to me, please come to my office after davening. I go up to his office after davening, and he says to me, would you like to go on Bacher Shlichus to Seattle, Washington? And I said to him, for 1 year, he said. So I said to him, of course. So then he gave me a list of 9 other Bachrim that I should find to tell him to come to the office. I became the head of the kfutza of the group. Now, years later, I asked Rabbi Levitin, was my name on that list? And Rabbi Levitin said, no. So I said, do you know how we got on the list? He says, I have no clue because nobody knows how your name got onto that list. Well, I said, I know I got onto the list. The Rebbetzin had a conversation with the Rebbe, and that's how my name got on the list. We know the Rebbetzin only spent, at most, maybe in those days, 20, 30 minutes a night with the Rebbe. And during that period of time, she spoke about me, Rabbi Klein, the Shmayanki. Like, why would she do that? You know, she has more important things to do than say, hey, I met this guy in an elevator and he wants to be your shliach. But that's what she was. She followed through. She really was concerned. She really cared. But something that I learned a couple of years ago about the Rebbetzin, that once she met you, she didn't give up. She followed you. You may not have known that she was following you, but she took an interest in you. No matter where you may be in the world, she was following what you were doing, how your service to Hashem was going. She cared about who you were. And the reason that I say this is because I feel that she looked out after me as well. In 1978, the Neil Moskowitz, Alav Shalom, bought 2014 Orrington, the Chabad house in Evanston. He thought it was a simple purchase and that he himself was going to open up that Chabad house. In fact, they had money down on an apartment building for 4 families to move from West Rogers Park, including himself, to Evanston. They went in front of the zoning board here in Evanston, and unbeknownst to Daniel at the time, the zoning board actually passed it. But then it went in front of city council, and unanimously city council ruled against the opening up of the Chabad house in Evanston. The Rebbe felt that was anti-Semitic, and the Rebbe told Daniel Moskowitz that they should take the city to court. Daniel at the time was 23, 24 years old, but yet he was willing to stand strong for what the Rebbe wants, and he took the city to court. And the Daniel won. Lubavitch Chabad of Illinois won. But the city wasn't happy with it. And the city had a tradition that whenever they lost in court, they would appeal. And they kept appealing until it went up to the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, in the Supreme Court of the United States, upheld the lower court's decision, and that enabled Chabad of Evanston to open. That was a 7-year court battle. Daniel several times asked the Rebbe, should we move someplace else? All the properties had opened up. And the Rebbe said, no, I wanted to be there. 2014 Orrington. Okay, which is I thought was very significant. Now, in the meantime, Chabad was expanding in Illinois. Daniel had his roots in West Rogers Park at that time, and he wasn't prepared at that time to move to Evanston. So Daniel approached a person that was in Kollel to come, and I got engaged. And at my engagement party in Chicago on February 10th, 1985, Daniel approached me and said, I asked somebody else to go on shlichus to Evanston, but if he says no, would you be willing to consider coming? And I said to Daniel, when that happens, come and call me. But up until now, there's nothing what to talk about. I'm not coming. There's nothing even what to think about. Anyway, a month later, I get a call. In those days, there's no cell phones. I got a call. I was in Seattle, Washington at that time teaching, and I got a call from Daniel. Am I willing to come to Northwestern, to Evanston? I'll pay the budget. I won't have to worry about finances. Oh, I'm a chaya. What's shliach today? Wouldn't want to go out on shlichus that he doesn't have to worry about a budget and finances. But I said to Daniel, I'll have to get back to you. No, I did not want to go. Absolutely not. But I didn't know what to do. So I called Rabbi Schusterman, Alav Shalom, because I could not ask my mashpia, because my mashpia was the Neil Moskowitz. How can I ask him? So I called my Rav. I called Rabbi Schusterman. What do I do? So Rabbi Schusterman, because I wanted to go to Kollel. I learned in those days. I enjoyed learning. And that's this typical thing. You go to Kollel for a year. And I was looking to go on shlichus in California. I wanted to go to Anaheim. I was working in the day camp and the day camps there and overnight camps in California for Long Beach. So Rabbi Schusterman said, listen, write the Rebbe the positives and negatives of going to Evanston and the positives and negatives of going on Kollel, and see what the Rebbe says. Because I felt, how can I just say no? This is Sentendil asking me. I felt it was the Rebbe asking me. So I wrote all these reasons why I don't want to go to Evanston. I didn't write one reason why I want to. And I wrote all these reasons why I want to go to Kalel. I was pretty one-sided. And I sent it into the Rebbe. Well, I don't hear anything back. Typically, in those days, you got an answer within 24 hours from the Rebbe. Typically, the answers in those days was ask your mashpia, ask your chaverim, ask other shluchim, the Rebbe doesn't tell you directly to go. Get the advice that you need from someplace else. And whatever that advice is, that's what the Rebbe wants you to do. In this instance, 3-4 days later, I get a call from Rabbi Klein. And Binyamin himself told me he was shocked. He said, the Rebbe wants you to go to Evanston to go to Northwestern. And he says he's going to mention it at the oil. I said, what? I was shocked. I thought for sure it was going to be no. That was it. I had no choice. It was 4 or 5 people in the 80s the Rebbe instructed to go to a specific place. In fact, actually Epstein, Rabbi Epstein's brother, is one of those. In terms of the Carolinas. But that being said, why did it take so long? Why did the Rebbe specifically mention it? I only found out the answer to this question 3 years ago. Dr. Ira Weiss, I know for Brangen, was talking about the Neil Moskowitz and how this young man stood up against the city of Evanston. That's what he talked about. And he said in 1978, we know the Rebbe had these 2 massive heart attacks. Dr. Weiss was the doctor, flew in from Chicago on Simchas Torah to take care of the Rebbe and didn't leave for months later. But every single day since he left New York, he called the Rebbetzin to find out how the Rebbe was doing. He spoke with the Rebbetzin every day. In fact, I was privileged to hear half of those phone calls 3-4 times because I was with Dr. Weiss. Oh, I got to call the Rebbetzin. And I heard what Dr. Weiss was saying. I didn't hear what the Rebbetzin was saying, but you can surmise certain things. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, what was fascinating to me was that Dr. Weiss said that when this law case started, every single day, the Rebbetzin asked Dr. Weiss to give her an update of how the law case for 2014 Orrington was going. She, in turn, sometimes gave the information over to the Rebbe. The Rebbe would sometimes ask questions to the Rebbetzin, to Dr. Weiss, back to Daniel. But every day she wanted a report about how the court case was going in terms of the Chabad house in Evanston, 2014 Orrington. Well, you can imagine how excited Dr. Weiss was after we were victorious, So Dr. Weiss called the Rebbetzin right away. And Dr. Weiss said to the Rebbetzin, we were successful. We won the case. We're going to be able to open now the Chabad house. And the Rebbetzin said to Dr. Weiss, and who is that shliach going to be? She was invested. Who's the shliach going to be? I don't have a doubt in my mind that she was invested in me. I don't know why, but don't have a doubt that she had this conversation with her mom, with the Rebbe, saying, remember that guy from the elevator? He's the guy you got to send to Evanston. He's going to do okay. And that's my partnership and relationship and my connections to Rebbetzin. And that's why I always tell people that I went on shlichus. I'm on the Rebbetzin shlichus. I went on shlichus because of the Rebbe.
Beautiful. Wow, Rabbi Klein, thank you. Wow, what a story and what a beautiful night to share this story on Chaf Bei Shvat on the yard side of the Rebbetzin, the 36th yard side of the Rebbetzin. Thank you. 40 years. You've made the Rebbetzin and the Rebbe and all of Illinois Jewry proud. And Hashem should continue to bless you with more and more hatzlacha in bringing Yiddishkeit and the message of the Rebbe to the community of Evanston, to the students at Northwestern, and the many, many people who you continue to have such a strong influence on. I want to thank you so much. Tomorrow night, everybody.